Surrounding the site of the world's worst nuclear accident, more than 4,000 square kilometers spanning Ukraine and Belarus was abandoned. More than 3 decades on, in a post-human landscape, nature has taken over. But what happened to those who refused to leave?
Моя земля, знаєте, і своя родина. Незамінимо.
Has the truth about this place become lost in the infamy of the disaster? Standing a kilometre from where the nuclear accident happened, we're getting less of an external dose of radiation than on the flight over.
3 times less than what we got on the aeroplane coming over.
And what does the future hold for those who still live in the shadow of Chernobyl?
Їхати ми нікуди не збираємось. Тут живуть наші діти.
– 130 kilometres north of the capital, Kiev, part of Ukraine has been cut off for more than 30 years. Heading for the exclusion zone, which is quite exciting, sort of a forbidden place, kind of shrouded in mystery. This is a controlled zone, a contaminated area almost twice the size of London that we have special permission to visit. We're going to the epicentre of an explosion. It happened on the 26th of April, 1986, a day the world would never forget.
The Soviet Union admitted this evening that there's been an accident at one of its nuclear power stations.
Авария произошла в одном из помещений 4-го энергоблока.
Perhaps the worst accident in the short history of the world's nuclear power industry.
We're taking a tour of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant with our guide, Stanislav.
Left side is for the control rooms. Here, first of all, control room of unit.
Safety regulations mean we have to protect our clothes from radioactive dust.
I know one rule. If you follow all rules, you don't break rules, everything will be okay. And 28 years, a little bit more, passed after my first coming to Chernobyl NPT. Everything is okay. God bless us.
With us is a scientist whose life's work has hinged on that one terrifying night in Soviet history. How long have you been studying the aftermath of what happened here?
Since 1990.
Have you ever been into the reactor building before?
I've never been before.
Reactor number 4 still leaks radiation, so it's entombed by a steel confinement structure containing remains that were blasted apart. This is footage captured beneath that dome. A now solidified mass of concrete and nuclear fuel is still so radioactive that people can't be under here for more than a few minutes. But the plant continued to produce power until the year 2000, and the neighbouring reactor is still being decommissioned. Few visitors are allowed in here, but we've been given permission to look inside.
Is your alarm going off?
That's my alarm going off, yeah.
Where's it? What have we gone up
So
to?
we've gone up to 14, and I set the amber warning to be at 10.
Right.
So we've just gone over that.
Throughout our trip, Jim is carrying a dosimeter, measuring the radiation dose we're getting every hour.
We're still well below the level where I considered we didn't want to get to. But I'm just going to switch it off because we don't want it going all the time.
Yeah. There's a strange atmosphere to this place, and you're so trussed up that there's a nervousness, there's a fear to that, I think. My heart's beating quite fast, actually.
It was 1:23 a.m. when engineers cut power to part of the Chernobyl plant's number 4 reactor. They were testing what would happen in the event of a blackout. What they didn't know was that the reactor was already unstable.
It wasn't just one person, it was a whole chain of people, from the reactor design people to the people operating it to the whole kind of safety culture.
The shutdown slowed turbines that drove a flow of cooling water to the reactor.
Reactor collapsed. reactor collapsed, everything collapsed, and when this engineer pushed the button to stop chain reaction, big pressure of water, steam was coming from bottom.
A steam explosion blew the lid off the reactor, exposing the core to the atmosphere. Air fueled a fire that burned for 10 days. That initial explosion killed 2 people. In the days that followed, emergency workers rushed in. People known as liquidators were sent to remove highly radioactive material that had been blasted onto the roofs of nearby buildings so it could be swept up and contained. 134 emergency workers suffered acute radiation sickness. 28 died within months. Another 19 have died since. Some surviving workers today live with skin and eye injuries from working in that highly radioactive environment. And the impact wasn't confined to this site or even to this country. A cloud of radioactive smoke and dust was carried on the wind around Europe. Information emerged only gradually from behind the Iron Curtain of the Soviet Union. That cloud, though, carried the truth of the disaster. The world held its breath. This was the largest accidental release of radioactivity into the environment in the history of nuclear power production. The cause, who was to blame, are issues still being debated to this day.
Every so-called accident, incidents concerned with the human factor. If there were some defects here in this type of reactor, who was the designer?
Yeah.
A robot? No, a man. And if the personnel made some mistakes during that test, who were the robots? No, the personnel.
Yeah.
Everywhere we come to one conclusion, and that is the human factor everywhere practically.
Today, the consequences of that terrible accident are etched onto this region. Within a boundary drawn at a 30-kilometre radius of the plant is the primary exclusion zone. No one was allowed to return here to live. But just beyond that, captured by an outer boundary, is a secondary zone where people have been left in limbo.
Раз, два, три, чотири.
The town of Narodici has a population of 2,500. Tatiana runs the kindergarten. She remembers the evacuation.
Коли сталася аварія, зразу із садочка забрали разом з вихователями, всіх дітей вивезли без батьків. Діти з вихователем, всіх персоналом вивезли в чисті зони. І коли через 3 місяці привезли назад, життя продовжувалось, багато поверталось назад, діти народжувались. І тому поступово дитячий садок почав наповнюватися дітьми.
But the future for these children and their families is uncertain. Narodici has some of the lowest radiation levels in the exclusion zone, but it's still officially designated contaminated. That means no agriculture is permitted and nothing new can be built here.
Це ж не секрет, що у нас половина батьків ніде не працює із-за того, що нема де працювати. Так хочеться, щоб ми так розквітли.
So could the secret to a new start for Narodici be hidden in the permanently abandoned primary zone? For many, it's a frightening place, but in the decades since the accident, hundreds of scientists have worked here, forensically examining Chernobyl's aftermath. We're going to meet a true exclusion zone expert.
Blossom, it's amazing.
Dr. Sergei Gashak came here in the immediate aftermath as one of the thousands of liquidators.
Thank you.
He's now a scientist. Although it's not legal to live here permanently, he still works here from this previously abandoned house.
Oh, this is a proper field station then. You have lockers for everybody's kit, somewhere to leave boots.
Yeah.
This is very organised. Is this a map of the exclusion zone?
Yeah.
The red are the hotspots?
Yeah.
Where is the nuclear power plant?
This nuclear power plant.
Yeah.
For this international community of scientists, the zone is a vast laboratory, allowing them to measure how a landscape recovers from nuclear catastrophe.
Altogether, this is the largest protected area in Europe, by a long way.
Yeah.
They eat, sleep and discuss their work here, but their days are spent out in the field. Today, with the research team, we're looking for wildlife. And following Sergei, we eventually come across one of many now desolate villages. It's become a strangely rich habitat, and a place Sergei seems totally at home.
I am a feral man.
You're a feral man.
Sometimes I see my family not so often like wilds.
This is Burukovka, which I'm probably pronouncing really badly. It's just completely taken over, which is why these villages have sort of become hubs for where some of these ecological studies can be done, because this is just a totally different place. It's not a village anymore, it's sort of a rewilded landscape. Inside some of these houses, it's still apparent just how quickly people had to leave.
Yeah, we can see someone's coat.
This absolutely.
But some of what people left behind through farming and gardening has turned into provisions for wild animals.
People, before the accident, introduced here a lot of plants. Also, they fertilized soil. So soil in villages a little bit richer than surrounding areas. That is why, according to already long-term study, we observe higher level of diversity of animals.
We have wolf.
Just outside the village, there are some obvious signs of animal life that moved in when people moved out.
You wanted to see wolf feces. We have fresh wolf feces.
But Jim Smith's here with Sergei to check cameras and audio recorders that have been silently monitoring the wildlife. All these years, combining the tracking of animal populations and measuring the contamination, suggests wildlife is now thriving in a place that many had assumed to be toxic.
Yes, the exclusion zone's contaminated, but if we would put it on a map of radiation dose worldwide, only the small hotspots would stand out. So this is a sort of natural radioactivities all around us, and it varies from country to country, from place to place. And most of the area of the exclusion zone gives rise to lower radiation dose rates than many areas of natural radioactivity worldwide.
It may seem strange that most of this wilderness that was created by a nuclear disaster has similar levels of radiation to many parts of the populated world. But being here, surrounded by nature that doesn't observe any boundaries or checkpoints, it actually feels like life is flourishing. Apart from glimpses on camera traps, though, I'm yet to get close to any of Chernobyl's wildlife. Dr. Marina Shikvira is following an unusual experiment. In 1998, zoologists released a herd of endangered wild horses here in the hope that they'd graze away overgrowth and reduce the risk of fire.
Marina's just spotted a whole herd. These are the Przewalski's horses. I'm going to see if we can get a little tiny bit closer.
It's a reproductive group. So they have several females, adult females, several cubs.
Several babies full.
Yes, some of them are 1 year old and some of them are 2 years old.
These animals are native to the open plains of Mongolia, but Marina's work is revealing some unexpected behavior that's helping them thrive here.
They use these abandoned buildings because they're avoiding of mosquitoes and heat and wind inside.
Oh, wow. So they're adapting.
Yeah.
They're adapting to the exclusion zone.
They were laying and sleeping even inside. So of course they're really good adapted to this place.
Wow. So they're really using the buildings, using the villages. Amazing.
Wildlife may be making the most of this place, but not every village was left for nature to reclaim. We're deep in the permanently abandoned zone, and some people still live here.
Здравствуйте. Привет. Your name is Victoria. Nice to meet you.
Today is Maria's 78th birthday, and she's made us breakfast.
Oh, wow. Вишневенькие, вишневенькие.
Спасибо.
Хорош, хорош.
За ваши именины.
Спасибо.
Up to the day of the accident, this had been the only home she knew. Her family simply travelled back across a then patchily enforced boundary. They refused to abandon the place.
І за ваше здоров'я, я баба вип'ю.
Що, вас перепустили?
Нас ніхто не пускав, самі їхали. Як Бог дав. Тут іще мене мама притормозила. Було мамі вже тоді 88 років. Ну, і я за нею слід. О, а якби той розум, да був, що зараз, був тоді. О.
Maria and her neighbours make up a remote community of just 15, a tiny village reclaimed after the disaster.
Спасибо.
Тебе з днем рождения. Желаю тобі здоров'я на довгі годи. І твоїм діткам, усім, щоб були дуже.
Спасибо. Що живемо, поки живеться. Да це і все, як воно. Як же дітки сказати, як уже года ж такі, що тому от, але ж своя земля, знаєте, і своя родина. Незамінимо. О.
The residents of this village are amongst just 200 self-settlers who returned and stayed. The vast majority who lost their homes in the exclusion zone have no hopes of ever coming back. Almost 50,000 of them lived here, in Pripyat. This was the Soviet dream town, purpose-built for workers at the power plant. It was evacuated overnight. No residents were allowed to return. Just a few kilometres from the plant, this is in one of the zone's hotspots. And after the city was permanently abandoned, it gradually turned to ruin. But in recent years, human activity has come back. Pripyat has been deemed safe to visit for short periods and is now a tourist destination. 60,000 people came here last year, keen to witness the decay.
Chernobyl was #1 on the list because it's, I guess, something that was in the news a lot when I was growing up as a kid, so it had really taken root in the imagination, you know. I wanted to see what it was like.
It's sort of the post-apocalyptic sort of environment, which I think is very scary.
The sense of danger here is now a selling point. But should we fear this place? That's a question only the decades of research can answer. On the dry bed of what was the reservoir providing water to cool the nuclear reactors, we've come with Jim to meet Gennady Laptev and his team.
We would just fly with the helicopter to nuclear power plant area, collecting samples of water, soil.
He first came here just 3 months after the accident. His work helped shape the exclusion zone.
This is more than half of my life, yes. In the early stage after accidents, the most important was to understand what is the extent.
To draw up the first maps of where
to drop the first maps, yes, position. And then, of course, much later, and as we know, the pattern of contamination after Chernobyl accident is significantly different all over this area. Yes. Yeah.
And in this spot, with the help of Jim's dosimeter, it's clear just how much the contamination varies and how much this place has changed.
So here, standing essentially in the cooling pond of the nuclear power plant, a kilometre from where the nuclear accident happened, we're getting less of an external dose of radiation than on the flight over.
3 times less than what we got on the aeroplane coming over.
So what could that mean for the outer zone, for Narodici? This is a community on the brink of change.
The objective is to support Ukraine.
Jim and his colleagues are here for a meeting that could remove this district from the exclusion zone, meaning they could start farming and building again.
All of the stakeholders are here, representatives of the local community, the administration, the people who run the exclusion zone. Hopefully that agreement is going to be hammered out here today.
Many here still fear Chernobyl radiation, how it might affect their and their children's health. Long-term impacts, though, have been hugely complicated to unpick. Estimates of cancers directly caused by the radiation range from a few hundred cases to many thousands. The contamination is known to have caused around 5,000 people who were children at the time to develop thyroid cancer. The vast majority were treated and cured. Among numerous reports of birth defects and other health problems, it's just not clear if any were linked to radiation. What is conclusive, according to the World Health Organization, is that people's mental health has been damaged by fear of radiation and the disruption to their lives. This meeting could lift restrictions that this community has lived with ever since the accident.
How did today go, do you think?
We're certainly in agreement here that there needs to be change. So the next step is to communicate with the politicians, tell them what our scientific conclusions are, tell them what the Narodici district want, and we hope that they will take action.
What's finally on the horizon means that Narodici's children might no longer be the children of Chernobyl. If that political agreement can be reached, the next generation here could shape its own future.
Хай би до нас їхали люди, щось будувалося розумінням. Справа в тому, що ми тут живемо. Їхати ми нікуди не збираємось. Тут живуть наші діти.
That disaster still casts a long shadow here, and what happened in 1986 will always be a feature of this place. But the research that's being carried out here shows that over 30 years, the situation has changed, and now perhaps for the sake of people who live here, it's time to move forward.